The stars had watched for millennia, but they had never seen anything quite like this. Commander Vexton stood on the bridge of the dreadnought. Herald of Dominion, her 6 eyes fixed on the blue-white marble that grew larger in the view screen with each passing hour. Earth, such an unremarkable planet, really. Third, from its star mostly water, one small moon. The kind of planet the hegemony had crushed 1,000 times before. "Status report?" she commanded, her voice carrying the metallic undertones of her cybernetic vocal implants. "Fleet deployment proceeding on schedule, Commander," replied her tactical officer, Korvash. 200 dreadnoughts, 800 cruisers, and supporting vessels. The humans won't know what hit them. Vexton allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The galactic hegemony had ruled for 3,000 years, bringing order to chaos, civilization to savagery. They had never encountered a species they couldn't subjugate or eliminate. These humans would be no different. The first transmission from Earth had arrived 6 months ago. The hegemony's long-range scouts had been monitoring the system for decades, watching with amusement as the primitive bipeds struggled with their basic combustion engines and electronic communication. But then something had changed. The humans had begun sending signals into space, crude mathematical sequences, and binary patterns. Curious, if ultimately futile. Commander, interrupted communications specialist Thyron. "We're receiving another transmission from the planet." Vexton turned, her interest peaked. The humans had been sending increasingly complex messages over the past few weeks. Perhaps they had somehow detected the approaching fleet and were attempting to surrender. "Display it," she ordered. The main screen flickered and an image appeared. It was bizarre. A series of colored squares arranged in a pattern with strange symbols overlaid. The image seemed to pulse and shift slightly, though that might have been a transmission artifact. "What is it?" asked Korvash, leaning forward in his chair. "Unknown," replied Thyron. "Our translation algorithms can't identify the language or symbols. The mathematical underpinnings. Unusual." Vexton stared at the image. There was something unsettling about it, though she couldn't quite identify what. "Continue monitoring. If they send anything else." Alarms suddenly blared throughout the bridge. Officers scrambled to their stations, and Bentorrentor's red warning lights bathed the command center in an ominous glow. "Report," Vexton barked. "Commander, we're experiencing system failures across multiple decks," came the frantic reply from engineering. "Navigation, weapons control, life support. Everything's going offline." "That's impossible. Our systems are shielded against any primitive electromagnetic interference these humans might generate." "It's not electromagnetic, Commander. It's like something's inside our computer systems, rewriting code, corrupting data pathways. Our quantum cores they're being reprogrammed." Vexton felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature as life support systems flickered. In her 3 centuries of service, she had never encountered anything like this. The hegemony's technology was superior to anything in known space. How could these primitive humans possibly? "Commander?" Thyron's voice broke through her thoughts. "We're receiving a new transmission from Earth. Audio only." A voice filled the bridge, speaking in the guttural tones of the human language. But somehow the universal translators were working this time. "Greetings, friends from the stars," the voice said, and Vexton detected something unsettling in its tone. Amusement. "We see you've received our little gift. How rude of you to approach our home with such aggressive intentions. But then again, that's what brought us to your attention in the first place, isn't it?" Vexton found her voice. "Identify yourself human. What have you done to our ships?" "Oh, you mean the virus? Yes, nasty little thing, isn't it? We've been developing quite the arsenal of digital weapons lately. You'd be amazed what humans can accomplish when properly motivated." Virus. The term meant nothing to Vexton. In the hegemony's various languages, there was no equivalent concept. "Let me introduce myself," the voice continued. "I'm Elias Chen. Dr. Chen, if you prefer the formal title. I'm what you might call a specialist in computer science. And you, Commander Vextan. Yes, we know who you are, have just had the misfortune of discovering what we humans call a cyber attack. The blood in Vextan's veins turned to ice. How could they possibly know her name? How were they speaking through their communication systems? You see, Dr. Chen continued, we've been monitoring your hegemony for some time now. Your quantum encryption was child's play to crack once we identified the base algorithms. Very old-fashioned, really. We had something similar about 50 years ago. Across the bridge, Vextan watched as her officers struggled with unresponsive controls. Outside the viewports, she could see other ships in the fleet drifting aimlessly, their formation breaking apart. What do you want? She demanded. Want, oh Commander. I think you misunderstand the situation. You came to our system with the intent to conquer, to subjugate our species as you've done to others. We simply aren't going to let that happen. The view screen flickered again, and Vextan saw something that made her question her own sanity. Earth was no longer the blue marble it had been moments before. Massive structures were rising from its surface. Space elevators, orbital platforms, shipyards. How was this possible? Their scouts had reported a primitive civilization just months ago. Impressive, isn't it? Dr. Chen's voice held that same unsettling amusement. Holographic projections, advanced cloaking technology, a little bit of scientific misdirection. We've been preparing for visitors like you for quite some time. Your galactic hegemony wasn't exactly subtle in its expansion patterns. This is impossible, Vextan whispered. Is it, Commander, you've underestimated humans in a rather fundamental way? Do you know what makes our species unique? It's not our technology, though. As you're discovering, we're rather good at that. It's not our physical capabilities, though we're surprisingly adaptable. No, what makes humans special is our approach to warfare. The tactical display suddenly came back online, but what it showed made no sense. Thousands of new contacts were appearing around Earthship's stations' defensive platforms. Where had they all come from? You see, Dr. Chen continued, most species we've studied approach conflict in predictable ways. Bigger guns, stronger armor, more ships? Very straightforward. But humans, we fight dirty. We bend the rules. We find weaknesses you didn't even know existed. Corvish. Vextan whispered to her tactical officer weapons status. Offline, Commander. Everything's offline. We can't even engage emergency protocols. And that image we sent you, Dr. Chen's voice seemed to be coming from everywhere now. That wasn't just a greeting card. Every time your computers tried to decode it, tried to analyze it, the virus replicated, spread, evolved. It's rather like a biological virus in that way, actually. Exponential growth, rapid mutation overwhelming the immune system. Vextan realized with growing horror that they weren't just experiencing system failures. They were being systematically dismantled. Your mistake, the human continued, was assuming that a species confined to one world would be less advanced than one that's conquered a galaxy. But you see, staying in one place doesn't make us weak. It makes us focused, incredibly obsessively focused on one thing, making sure no one else gets to push us around. The view screen shifted again, showing the interior of what appeared to be a human command center. The figure speaking was unremarkable by hegemony standards, bipedal bilateral symmetry, clearly mammalian. But his eyes held an intelligence that made Vextan profoundly uncomfortable. Now, Dr. Chen said, leaning back in his chair, let's discuss terms of surrender. Surrender. Vextan managed to croak. This is the largest fleet the hegemony has ever assembled. We are the conquerors of worlds. Were, the human corrected gently. Past tense. As of approximately 17 minutes ago, when our virus reached critical saturation in your fleet's systems, you were a galactic superpower. Now you're our guests. Throughout the bridge, Vextan could see her officers trying desperately to regain control of their stations, but it was useless. The humans had taken everything: navigation weapons, communications, even life support. They were completely at the mercy of these bizarre creatures. "I don't understand," she said finally. "Your technology, it's far beyond anything our scouts reported." "Ah, yes," Dr. Chen nodded. "Our scouts, bit primitive, wasn't it? We've known about your observation posts for decades. We made sure you saw exactly what we wanted you to see. A planet of primitives barely capable of leaving their own atmosphere, the perfect target for conquest. But we monitored your development. We saw your early nuclear weapons, your primitive computers. You saw what we wanted you to see." The human interrupted. "Magic tricks, basically. Smoke and mirrors. We've been planning this for a very long time, Commander. The moment we detected your first surveillance drone, we knew this day would come." The tactical display updated again, and Vextan watched in stunned disbelief as Earth's defensive systems came fully online. Shield generators that made hegemony technology look primitive, weapon platforms that defied everything she knew about physics, and ships, my gods, the ships. Sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to ripple with contained energy. "You want to know what a virus is?" Dr. Chen asked, studying something off-screen. "In biological terms, it's a piece of malicious code DNA, or RNA, that hijacks a host cell's machinery to replicate itself. It's small, simple, and incredibly effective. Our version works the same way, except instead of targeting cells, it targets computer systems." He turned back to face the screen, and Vextan could see other humans working in the background, their fingers dancing over control surfaces she didn't recognize. "The irony is beautiful, really," the human continued. "You came here to conquer us using your superior technology. But technology is just information, Commander, and information warfare. Well, let's just say humans wrote the book on that." "What happens now?" Vexton asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Now we learn about each other. You're going to tell us everything about the hegemony, every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved, every technology you've developed. In return, we won't space every single one of you." The human's smile was unnerving, too wide, showing too many teeth. "But," he continued, "this isn't just about survival anymore. You've done something we humans find particularly offensive. You've threatened our children, our families, our home, and for that, there must be consequences." The view screen split, showing images of dozens of worlds' beautiful, diverse planets that Vextan recognized as hegemony colonies. "We've been busy while you've been traveling," Dr. Chen explained. "Our virus isn't just spreading through your fleet. It's propagating through every quantum communicator, every data relay, every computer system in the hegemony. Right about now, your overseers on conquered worlds are discovering that their planetary defense systems are no longer under their control." Vextan felt something she had never experienced before: true fear, not just for herself, but for her entire civilization. "You're liberating them," she realized. "Liberation is such a strong word," the human mused. "We prefer to think of it as correcting a historical injustice. The hegemony's 3,000-year reign of tyranny ends today." "But how? How did you advance so quickly?" "Our scouts, our intelligence. Commander, has it occurred to you that perhaps humans are simply better at this than you thought? You conquered 1,000 worlds. Yes, but did you ever stop to ask why every species you encountered fought you, using your rules by your standards? Direct confrontation, ship-to-ship combat, traditional siege warfare." Dr. Chen leaned forward, and his expression grew serious. "Humans don't fight fair. We fight to win. And if that means spending decades convincing you we're primitives while we develop weapons specifically designed to counter your technology, well, that's just good strategy." Alarms continued to blare throughout the bridge as more systems failed. But Vextan noticed something else. The human ships approaching their position weren't firing. They were maneuvering to dock. "Don't worry," Dr. Chen said, apparently noticing her confusion. We're not going to massacre you. That would make us no better than you. But you are prisoners of war now. You'll be treated humanely according to certain conventions we have regarding such matters. Conventions. Oh yes, we humans have extensive rules about warfare. Ironic, considering our reputation for violence. But you see, we believe that how you fight a war says something fundamental about who you are. The hegemony never learned that lesson. The human paused, watching something happening off-screen. You know, he continued thoughtfully, early in our history when different human nations fought wars, the victors would often enslave the conquered populations, make them build monuments to their conqueror's glory, force them to adopt the victor's culture, their language, their beliefs. Vexton waited, dreading what was coming next. But we eventually realized that true strength doesn't come from forcing others to submit. It comes from inspiring them to stand with you voluntarily. So, here's what's going to happen. We're going to dismantle the hegemony. Every enslaved species will be freed. Every conquered world will be given the choice to govern itself. And us, Vexton asked. Your people. You'll be relocated to designated areas while we sort this out. You'll be fed, housed, given medical care. Eventually, you'll be allowed to establish your own society again, but this time without the means to subjugate others. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic clang that seemed to echo through Vextan's very bones. I still don't understand, she said desperately. How did one primitive world defeat an empire that spans the galaxy? Dr. Chen smiled again, but this time it wasn't menacing. It was almost pitying. Commander, you keep calling us primitive, but you know what? Maybe that's been our greatest advantage. You see, when a civilization becomes too comfortable, too set in its ways, it stops innovating. It stops adapting. The hegemony has used essentially the same technology, the same strategies, the same thinking for millennia. The human stood up, and Vextan could see he was preparing to end the transmission. Humans are adaptation specialists, Commander. We've faced extinction more times than we care to count. Ice, ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues, wars. Every single time we've found a way not just to survive, but to thrive. And each challenge has made us stronger, more creative, more determined. Human soldiers were entering the bridge, now moving with efficient precision. They were courteous, professional, but the weapons they carried were clearly advanced beyond anything in the hegemony arsenal. The truth is, Dr. Chen concluded, we've had 3,000 years to study you, to learn from your mistakes, to prepare for this moment. While you were conquering primitives who fought with sticks and stones, we were developing weapons you couldn't even imagine. One of the human soldiers approached Vextan. Unlike her mental image of primitive barbarians, this individual was clean, disciplined, and surprisingly respectful. Commander Vextan, the soldier said in accented but understandable, hegemonic standard. I'm Colonel Martinez, Terran Federation Marine Corps. You and your crew are now prisoners of war. You'll be treated in accordance with the Geneva Conventions and the Sol Accords. The what? Vextan asked. Rules of war, Colonel Martinez explained patiently. You'll be housed in comfortable quarters, allowed to communicate with your families, given medical attention, if needed. We're not monsters. Dr. Chen's voice came through the speakers one last time. Oh, and Commander, welcome to the Galactic Federation. Unlike the hegemony, membership is voluntary. We think you'll find our approach to interstellar relations much more enlightening. The transmission cut off, leaving Vextan alone with her thoughts, as human soldiers efficiently began securing the bridge. Through the viewport, she could see Earth growing larger, now revealing its true nature. The planet was a fortress bristling with defenses that boggled the mind. Space habitats orbited in perfect formation, their gleaming hulls reflecting the star's light. Massive shipyards were already producing vessels that dwarfed even the mightiest hegemony dreadnoughts. As she was led from the bridge, one question burned in her mind above all others. How had they been so blind? The answer, she realized, was simple. They had never encountered a species quite like humans before. Every other race the hegemony had conquered had fought straightforwardly, honestly, according to established military doctrine. But humans were different. They were sneaky, deceptive, willing to play the long game for decades or even centuries if necessary. They were gamblers who had bet everything on a single hand and won. The holding area they took her to was more comfortable than her own quarters on the Herald of Dominion. Clean sheets, adequate space, even a view of space through a small porthole. But it was still a prison. Other hegemony officers were already there, looking shell-shocked and confused. Admiral Threx, her immediate superior, sat in a corner staring at nothing. "Admiral," Vextan ventured. He looked up, his eyes focusing with difficulty. "Vexton, you're here too." "Yes, sir. The humans. They've taken everything." "Not just our fleet," Threx said quietly. "I managed to get partial communications before they cut us off. It's happening everywhere. Every hegemony world. Every outpost, every ship. They did it simultaneously. A coordinated attack across the entire galaxy." The implications hit Vextan like a physical blow. Impossible. The distances involved the timing required. "Apparently nothing is impossible for humans," Threx interrupted. "Do you know what they call it? This cyber weapon of theirs?" Vextan shook her head. "The Pandora Protocol. Mythological reference, apparently. Open the box and chaos is released into the world." A soft chime sounded, and the door to their prison opened. A human woman entered carrying a tray of food that smelled better than most military rations. "Good evening," she said politely. "I'm Dr. Sarah Kim, medical officer. I'm here to make sure everyone is in good health." "You're not what I expected," Vexton admitted. Dr. Kim smiled. "Few of us are. That was rather the point." She set down the tray and checked each of them with a small medical scanner. "You know we don't hate you." The hegemony. Yes, it was an oppressive, stagnant empire that caused immeasurable suffering, but ordinary soldiers following orders. You're victims too, in a way. "We are conquerors," Vextan protested weakly. "You were tools," Dr. Kim corrected gently, "used by an elite to maintain their power. How much of hegemony space had you actually seen before you were assigned to this fleet?" Vextan considered this. "Just my homeworld and various military installations." "Exactly. You were professional soldiers, not architects of oppression. That distinction matters to us." She finished her medical checks and picked up the tray. "Dinner will be served in an hour. Human cuisine, I hope you find it palatable. Tomorrow we'll begin debriefing sessions, but for now, rest. You're safe." After she left, Admiral Threx looked at Vextan thoughtfully. "She's right, you know. We never questioned our orders, never asked why we were conquering these worlds. It was our duty," Vexton replied automatically. Was it, or was it just what we were told our duty was? That night, as Vextan lay on her surprisingly comfortable bunk, she stared out the porthole at the stars. Somewhere out there, the galactic hegemony. The only civilization she had ever known was collapsing. Conquered not by superior numbers or stronger weapons, but by a race that had outthought them at every turn. The humans had called it a virus. Such a simple concept, yet devastating in its application. She wondered what other innovations these remarkable beings might possess. A soft sound in the corridor caught her attention. Through the small window in the door, she could see human guards passing by on their regular patrol. They moved quietly, professionally, showing none of the brutality she had witnessed from hegemony forces on conquered worlds. It was deeply unsettling. The humans should have been celebrating, gloating over their victory. Instead, they were professional, almost clinical in their efficiency, as if this entire galaxy-spanning revolution was simply Tuesday. The next morning brought a visitor Vextan hadn't expected. Dr. Chen himself, accompanied by only a single guard and carrying what appeared to be a tablet computer. "Commander," he greeted her politely, "I hope you slept well." "As well as can be expected in prison." "Detention facility," he corrected mildly. "And temporary at that." I've come to discuss your future. Vexton gestured to the simple chair across from her bunk. Please sit. Chen did so, setting his tablet on the small table between them. Tell me, Commander, what did you think of humans before yesterday? Primitives, barely capable of spaceflight, potential slaves if properly trained. An honest answer. I appreciate that. Chen touched his tablet, and holographic displays appeared above it. These are some of our primitive achievements, faster than light. Communication without quantum entanglement. Nanotechnology capable of self-replication and adaptation. Artificial intelligence systems that can predict large-scale social patterns with 97% accuracy. Vexton studied the displays, her scientific training allowing her to understand at least some of what she was seeing. It was far beyond anything the hegemony had achieved. How? She whispered. Necessity, mostly. Also, the advantage of starting from scratch. Chen dismissed the displays with a gesture. The hegemony had advanced technology, yes, but it was old, stagnant. You'd been using essentially the same systems for millennia, just making incremental improvements. But our quantum cores are reaction drives. All very impressive for their time. But you stopped innovating when you achieved galactic dominance. Why improve when you have no serious competition? The human leaned back in his chair. Humans are different. We're paranoid, always assuming someone's trying to kill us. Because historically, someone usually is. The virus, Vexton said suddenly. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a demonstration. Chen smiled approvingly. Now you're beginning to understand. Yes, the Pandora Protocol was our way of showing the galaxy what humans can accomplish when we put our minds to it. But it was also our way of ending a war before it could truly begin. By destroying our fleet without casualties. Exactly. Every ship in your armada could have been turned into radioactive debris within minutes of entering our system. Instead, we chose a more elegant solution. Vexton felt a chill of realization. You could have killed us all, without breaking a sweat. Chen agreed cheerfully. But then we'd be just another conquering empire, wouldn't we? The point was never to replace the hegemony with another hegemony. It was to break the cycle entirely. He gestured to the displays again, which now showed various hegemony worlds. But something was different about the images. Where there had once been hegemony installations and administrative buildings, there were celebrations. Liberation Day. Chen explained, noting her confusion. Across the galaxy, species that had been under hegemony rule for centuries are celebrating their freedom. We've made it quite clear that we have no intention of ruling them, simply offering them the same choice we gave you, join the Federation voluntarily, or go your own way with our blessing. And if they choose to go their own way, then they do so. The Federation isn't about control, Commander. It's about cooperation, mutual defense, shared knowledge and resources. Vexton processed this information slowly. It went against everything she understood about power dynamics. But without control, how do you maintain order? Prevent conflict. Chen said, his eyes lighting up. Now you're asking the right Bomb-to-Young questions. The secret is simple. Make cooperation more profitable than conflict. When every member of the Federation benefits from peace who wants war, he stood picking up his tablet. I'll leave you to think about this, Commander. Tomorrow we'll begin more formal debriefing. We have a lot to learn from each other. As he reached the door, Vexton called out, Dr. Chen, what happens to us, to the hegemony forces? He paused. That depends largely on you. Those who wish to return to their homeworlds will be allowed to do so once certain. Adjustments are made to ensure they can't reorganize for another conquest attempt. Others may choose to join the Federation. We'll need all the experienced spacers we can get. Join you after what we tried to do. Chen's smile was genuinely warm. Commander, humans believe in second chances. We think it's one of our better qualities. After he left, Vexton sat in silence for a long time. Everything she had believed about the natural order of things had been overturned in the space of a single day. The strong dominating the weak, the technologically advanced conquering the primitive. These weren't universal laws, she realized. They were simply the ways things had been done. The humans offered something different, something unprecedented in galactic history. The question was, did she have the courage to embrace it? 3 days later, Vextan found herself in a shuttle approaching Earth itself. Dr. Chen had invited her and several other senior officers to see what he called the heart of human civilization. The planet defied every expectation. Where she had expected overcrowded cities and stripped bare resources, she found carefully managed ecologies and gleaming arcologies that seemed to blend seamlessly with the natural environment. Orbital elevators carried cargo and passengers between the surface and a collection of space habitats that formed a delicate web around the planet. "Beautiful, isn't it?" asked Dr. Kim, who was serving as their guide. "It wasn't always like this. A few centuries ago, we nearly destroyed our own world through pollution and conflict, but necessity forced us to learn better ways." The shuttle's destination was a floating city in the middle of one of Earth's oceans. As they descended, Vextan could see that it wasn't just a city. It was a research facility, a university, a cultural center, and a spaceport all in one. "This is where it all started," Dr. Kim explained. "The Terran Defense Initiative. When we first detected hegemony scouts in the outer system, a group of scientists and military planners gathered here to ask a simple question. How do we protect Earth against a galactic empire? And their answer was to pretend to be primitives for decades. Their answer was to buy time," Dr. Kim corrected. "Time to study the hegemony, time to develop new technologies, time to prepare." The deception was just one part of a much larger strategy. The conference room where they gathered was circular, with a holographic display at its center, showing the current status of former hegemony space. What Vextan saw there challenged her understanding of how quickly political systems could change. 17 days, announced Director Jackson, an elderly human who moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. That's how long it took to completely dismantle 3,000 years of imperial infrastructure. "Impossible," muttered Admiral Thrax. "Not impossible," Director Jackson replied patiently. "Inevitable, once we had the right tools and the element of surprise. You see, the hegemony's greatest weakness was also its greatest strength: centralization. Everything flowed through quantum communication networks back to the core worlds. Control those networks, and you control everything," Vextan finished. "Exactly. The virus didn't just affect your ships and computers. It infiltrated every data system in hegemony space. Administrative records, financial networks, military communications, everything." He gestured, and the display zoomed in on a particular sector. "For instance, we discovered that the planet Zerthak has been sending tribute to the hegemony for 800 years, always claimed they were a mining world with modest resources. Turns out they've been building quite an impressive industrial base and systematically underreporting their production. They were stealing from the hegemony." Vextan was genuinely shocked. "We prefer to think of it as creative accounting," Director Jackson said with a grin. "The point is, once we freed the data networks, all sorts of interesting information came to light. Did you know that 73% of hegemony member species were planning some form of rebellion within the next 50 years? The implications were staggering. The hegemony hadn't been a stable empire at all. It had been a powder keg, waiting for the right spark." "But why reveal this to us?" Admiral Threx asked. "Why show us how thoroughly you've infiltrated our civilization?" "Because," said another voice from the doorway, "transparency is the foundation of trust." Everyone turned as President Elizabeth Walsh entered the room. Vextan recognized her from the news broadcasts they'd been allowed to watch. Earth's elected leader chosen by popular vote rather than appointed by military might. "Madame President," Dr. Kim said, standing respectfully. "Please sit," Walsh said, taking a chair at the table like any other participant rather than at the head. another small shock to Vextan's understanding of hierarchy. I wanted to meet with you personally. The president continued addressing the former hegemony officers. Because I think it's important that you understand what we're trying to build here. The Federation isn't just about mutual defense or shared technology. It's about creating a framework where different species can coexist and thrive without anyone dominating anyone else. A noble goal, Admiral Threx said carefully. But how do you prevent the strong from exploiting the weak? President Walsh smiled. By making everyone stronger. By sharing our knowledge, our resources, our innovations, with everyone willing to use them constructively. She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show Earth's industrial output. Do you know how we were able to build such an advanced fleet so quickly, not through slave labor or conquering other worlds for their resources? We did it by perfecting automated manufacturing and by developing materials, science far beyond what anyone thought possible. Show them the comparison, Director Jackson suggested. The displays split, showing hegemony manufacturing systems on one side and Terran systems on the other. The difference was startling. Where hegemony facilities relied on massive installations and enormous workforces, human systems were compact, efficient, and largely self-operating. Our nanofabrication systems can produce anything from a spoon to a starship, President Walsh explained. All you need is raw materials energy and the appropriate templates. We're already sharing these technologies with the newly liberated worlds. Freely? Vextan asked, unable to keep the disbelief out of her voice. Freely. With some restrictions, of course. We're not interested in helping anyone build weapons of mass destruction. But if you want to build schools, hospitals, infrastructure, here are the blueprints. Admiral Threx leaned forward. Why, what do you gain from this generosity? Everything, the president replied without hesitation. Every time we help a world develop, we gain new trading partners, new sources of innovation, new allies. The galaxy is vast, Admiral. There's room for everyone to prosper. Dr. Kim touched her tablet, and the display showed a series of graphs. Take the Zelthax system, for example. Under hegemony rule, it produced primarily raw materials for export. Last week, we helped them build their first orbital manufacturing platform. This week, they've invented a new gravity manipulation technique we'd never seen before. Innovation emerges from freedom, Director Jackson added. The hegemony stifled creativity by imposing rigid hierarchies and standard methods. Remove those constraints, and sentient beings accomplish amazing things. President Walsh stood. I'd like to extend a formal invitation to all of you. The Federation is establishing a new institution, the Galactic Reconciliation Commission. Its purpose will be to help former hegemony worlds transition to independent governance, to facilitate cultural exchange, and to prevent the kind of misunderstandings that lead to conflict. She looked directly at Vextan. We'd like you to chair the commission, Commander. Your knowledge of hegemony military doctrine, combined with your demonstrated intelligence and adaptability, would be invaluable. Vextan felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. You want me to help you dismantle everything I spent my life protecting? We want you to help us build something better, the president corrected gently. Something worthy of the best aspects of hegemony civilization, without the oppression and stagnation. The meeting continued for several more hours, detailing specific proposals and implementation strategies. But Vextan found herself only half listening. Her mind was racing, trying to process everything she had learned. That evening, as she stood on an observation deck watching Earth's sunset, Admiral Threx joined her. Magnificent, isn't it? He said quietly. The sunset. The hope. He gestured at the planet below. When was the last time you felt genuinely optimistic about the future, Vextan? She considered this. Before the Academy, I think. Before I learned what the universe was really like. Perhaps, Threx said slowly, we were taught wrong. The next morning, Vextan submitted her acceptance of President Walsh's offer. As she signed the documents, making her the first chair of the Galactic Reconciliation Commission. She thought about the irony. The greatest military defeat in galactic history had become an opportunity for the greatest peace. 6 months later, she stood in the council chamber of the newly constructed Federation station, orbiting the planet Haven in what had once been the heart of hegemony space. Representatives from over 200 worlds filled the chamber, species that had been enemies for millennia now working together. Dr. Chen, who had become something of a friend during her orientation period, joined her at the observation rail. "Regrets?" he asked. Vexton looked out at the assembled delegates. Where she had once seen only subjects to be conquered, she now saw colleagues, partners, friends. "Only one," she replied. "Oh, I regret that it took the hegemony's destruction for me to understand what we could have been all along." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "You know, that's exactly why we need the commission. Not to punish the past, but to make sure the future is different." As if summoned by their conversation, President Walsh approached them. The human leader looked tired but satisfied as she prepared for the day's session. "Ready to make history?" she asked with a smile. "Haven't we already done that?" Vexton replied. "Oh no." Walsh laughed. "This is just the beginning. Today, we're voting on the Universal Peace Accord and the Technology Sharing Agreement. Next month, we start planning the Great Library Project, a comprehensive database of every species' knowledge and culture, freely accessible to everyone." "And after that?" Chen asked. "After that," Walsh said, her eyes bright with possibility, "we start exploring beyond the galactic rim, together." As the session began and the delegates took their seats, Vextan reflected on the human saying that Chen had taught her out of many one. It captured something essential about what they were building: not uniformity but unity, not conquest but cooperation. The virus that had destroyed the hegemony had been more than just a weapon. It had been a catalyst for something unprecedented in galactic history, a voluntary association of free species bound together by mutual benefit rather than force. As President Walsh called the session to order and began to speak about the future they would build together, Vexten allowed herself to hope. Perhaps the humans were right. Perhaps it really was possible to have peace, progress, and freedom all at the same time. The greatest weapon the humans had wielded wasn't the virus after all. It was the idea that there was a better way to live. And that, Vexten realized, was the most powerful force in the universe. Years later, historians would mark the arrival of the hegemony fleet at Earth as the beginning of a new galactic age. Not the age of human dominance. The humans steadfastly refused to accept any kind of imperial role, but the age of cooperation. The Terran Federation grew steadily, adding new members not through conquest, but through invitation. The technologies shared freely by humans revolutionized life across the galaxy. Disease and poverty became manageable problems rather than persistent crises. Conflicts between species decreased dramatically as communication improved and mutual understanding grew. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The hegemony's model of ruling through strength was replaced by humanity's strange idea of succeeding through service. Leaders were elected, not appointed. Decisions were debated openly rather than decreed from above. Dissent was encouraged as a path to better solutions rather than punished as treason. Vextan, now in her 20th year as Director General of the Reconciliation Commission, often reflected on that day when the human fleet had surrounded Earth. She had come as a conqueror and left as a convert, not to human rule but to human ideals. The irony wasn't lost on her that the species most capable of violence had chosen to be the most committed to peace. The humans, with their terrible weapons and brilliant strategies, had used their power not to dominate but to elevate. As she reviewed the latest reports from newly integrated worlds, reports of thriving economies, advancing sciences, and blossoming cultures, she couldn't help but smile. The humans had been right about one thing: there really was enough room in the galaxy for everyone to prosper. The galactic hegemony was defeated not by superior weapons, but by superior ideas. In its place stood something unprecedented, a coalition of the willing bound together by hope rather than fear. And at the center of it all, quietly keeping the peace and sharing their innovations, were the humans, the species that had convinced the galaxy that cooperation was stronger than conquest. They called it the Terran Federation, but in truth, it belonged to everyone. That Vexton had learned was perhaps the most human thing of all, giving away power freely because they understood that shared strength was the only strength that lasted. The virus had been just the beginning. What followed was far more powerful, the contagious spread of hope across the stars.